Perhaps. Yeah, I can conclude.
Okay, I'm good.
James, can I just take one up? You'll respond first.
Okay.
All we ever get, particularly on television, is saturation coverage about how wonderful the royals are. I mean, as I was coming out tonight, on the main BBC News, there must have been nearly a 10-minute item about this Jubilee nonsense. And then followed up on the London News, barely 15 minutes later, with another 5 or 6 minutes. You know, come on, what happened to balance?
The gentleman behind the glasses and the hat.
Just to make a few factual points, Dave Shepherd. The reason
without, I suggest you smuggle those into a tight question.
You'll see why I don't want to in a second. The reason the Sun said the monarchy, the royal family, only cost us 62p a year per taxpayer was because the Queen had decided for the first time to issue a tax statement. Your paper, The Guardian, then set its auditor on the tax statement, and he couldn't have it because, amongst other things, she uses shell companies. If you don't know what a shell company is, ask your finance editor. Secondly, the independence of the monarch is not so benign. I recollect the elected Prime Minister of Australia, Gough Whitlam, was semi-toppled or toppled on the advice of the Queen's appointed High Commissioner in Australia. That doesn't seem to me to be democratic or fair in Australia. I know they descended from convicts, but it's not really fair to do that. Thirdly, the Windsor Castle fire had to be paid for, and the Treasury decided to allow the Queen to open up the palaces tax-free. And lo and behold, the Commons found that £13 million excess was raised by this means, and they asked the Royal Chamberlain, but they didn't have the Queen in front of them, who authorised the pocketing. And he said, not me, you'll have to ask Her Majesty. Well, as far as I know, MPs can't summon Her Majesty to answer the question.
Now you've had 3 statements.
The last 2 points. The Mirror alleged there was hanky-panky between Prince Charles and Diana before they got married on the Royal Train. The Press Complaint Commission took a proactive complaint, allegedly because the Prince couldn't make a complaint himself, being such a gentleman. I don't know if you have any view of this. When I made the complaint, I had to provide evidence, and I'm left to get the evidence myself. Now, I do admit the Queen is the most knowledgeable person in the country on Commonwealth leaders because she meets all of them, and she's got the right to listen to a talk by the Prime Minister of what's going on. But it doesn't seem to me to be the democratic system. And finally, is that true?
That's 3 points now. That's 4.
Get the question. Here you are.
Thank you very much. I'm going to take this lady here.
Dissociating myself from any movement, and I suspect that quite a lot of us here were completely independent. I'd like to ask the panel about what I think a lot of us feel is a critical issue. I think we know that both elected and non-elected figures can be stupid, venal, corrupt, and that is our daily experience at the moment, certainly. But I'd like to ask the panel what they think the effect of us being subjects, which is is what we are, and not citizens, because we are subjects, technically. And I think there is a trickle-down effect where that's not articulated, but if you've ever been close to it, and many of you have, you will know that there is a very strong political effect to being a subject. And when you write to the Queen, you say, "I beg to remain, ma'am, your most humble and obedient servant." Do you want to be read?
All right.
How
Thank you very
does this
much.
affect
That's a
the
good
whole
question.
population?
Jeff, I'm going to take the answers from the top table here.
Jack, what's the effect of being a subject rather than a citizen? I mean, after all, we did away with one king because we felt
it's a form of words, an actual the form of words when 20 or 30 years ago. Look at your passports today. In all our parents' and grandparents' passports, we were British subjects. We're now British citizens. So I don't think that arises. Again, the form that you said you felt you had to do in writing to the Queen was a form that our grandfathers thought they should use if they wrote to their bank managers or anybody else for that matter. It's the old formal way that none of us use today. Yours sincerely and the like. There was concern earlier about minority views and feeling terribly downtrodden and hard done by. And can I say I had immense sympathy for that, because I was one of those who wrecked my political career by saying the euro was wrong in principle and wrong in practice, and in return was called a Little England, uncivilized lunatic and all the rest. So I rest my case on that one, and if you believe what you do, stick to your guns and argue your case. You are way outvoted at the moment for reasons which my colleague will try to put across.
We're not outvoted because we don't get a vote.
I'll tell you what, I'll articulate the fact. Graham mentioned it. What's wrong with having a referendum with a succession? To say, do you approve or not that the next person to take the job?
I would think that there is absolutely no problem whatsoever. I mean, okay, referenda in this country happen very, very rarely. They happen only when it's a matter of major constitutional importance. You know, we're not Switzerland. We don't have votes every Sunday on whether to build a motorway or whatever. If it's decided that, if it's felt that there is a need to have a referendum on should we maintain the monarchy or should we not maintain the monarchy, then, you know, why don't we have it tomorrow? I don't quite see why we should wait for the Queen to die to... so that was...
I posed a question to Charles. Yes or no?
I thought the whole idea of that Graham raised, and he mentioned having a referendum, but then he was a little vague as to when he thought we should have it. I think he said something like when the opinion polls show one would be needed, or maybe you can tell us when should we have a referendum? What's the precondition?
Well, I think most governments who obviously have to decide these things would say, most ordinary people would say that you have one and there's a need. I think you fully accept that at the moment the opinion polls are not precedented, but obviously, ultimately when the argument is actually being had and when the polls show that there is a need to have a vote, then you need to do that through a referendum. But the point is at the moment the polls do not reflect opinion after a vigorous, free and fair election. They reflect opinion after people have been told for many years that it's harmless, benign, that it's nonsense about tourism, which is utterly untrue. They've constantly given all this guff and they have been full force of the BBC promoting them almost every day. That is not a situation in which you can have a reasonably reached set of opinions. So you wouldn't have it tomorrow at all. You would have it at least after a full, frank and fair debate. And then it comes on the media question was asked. And the media, the press, they're free press, and that's a great thing about this country. They are free to do and say almost as they please, although not entirely, as we're finding out at Lewiston, but there are limitations, but they can say, express their opinion. The broadcast media are not allowed to do that, and yet they absolutely disgrace themselves with entirely unbalanced promotion of material in favour of the royal family. And that is a real problem. We're supposed to be a democratic society. Today, I was having, again on Twitter, a journalist was arguing that ITN or ITV ought to represent the majority view. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. They're a broadcaster. There's an obligation to represent a balance. If you're saying that our broadcasters are only going to represent the majority view, then that would suggest that in 1997 the BBC had to switch to promoting the Blair government. And it's complete nonsense. So, we need to have free and fair debate, and that needs to be facilitated by our national broadcasters. And unfortunately, with the BBC particularly, but the others as well, particularly when you look at the absolutely awful Mark program, it's going to be very, very difficult to have that free and fair debate. Until that's actually taking place, then referenda are really right.
Can I just make a point?
I just want to get Jackson because he did.
Well, I'm quite happy to have a referendum tomorrow, and it will be binding for the next 50 or 100 years. Graham is proposing that we hold a referendum as and when, if by any chance the monarchy becomes unpopular, that is a precise moment to have the referendum. So I think that's an absolute nonsense. If we're going to have a referendum, let's get on with one about whether we're going to remain in the European Union with all the nonsenses around democracy. It's very much present.
Do you think you win the argument with Charles III? I think that was my question. Do you think if you put it to the people that Charles should ascend to the throne, and the question is monarchy remains or ends?
I think that's something to look at the time. It's not part of our system, but...
Well, can I make one point? Sorry, can I make one point? Also, just on the subject of the media. I was quite amused by the example of Jones' paper, the Joan writes for The Independent, which, when it was launched in 1986, they vowed, Andrew Bishopsgate, the editor, vowed to ignore royal stories. He took sort of a deliberate step not to cover any royal stuff. And apparently he claimed later that he had a private bet with himself that a successful newspaper could manage without covering royalty. Now, do we get the Independent leading sort of insightful coverage of sort of the Republican cause? Do we find them exposing the evils of the monarchy? Not really. Whittam Smith himself said later, for good commercial reasons, national newspapers as a whole cannot any longer manage without the royal family.
It's a reflection on changing editors and the paucity of argument.
In the interest of some sort of gender balance of having out Joan.
I just want to make a point about the question about being subjects, because I think this is very important. The Queen expects us to be subjects, and my experience of her, I was at a Christmas party at Buckingham Palace on one occasion. I was introduced to her, and I was there, although I'm a Republican, and I'm polite, and so I was introduced to the Queen. Someone said, "This is Joan Smith, she's an office," and I said hello. And the Queen looked at me and she looked aghast. And there was a long silence, and then she cut me dead and passed on to the next person. And what was interesting about that story is that I don't have any choice. This is my head of state. I've never had any choice in that. And I'm polite to her, but because I didn't curtsy and I didn't wait for her to speak to me, because I didn't observe the laws of deference, she wasn't prepared to even acknowledge me. And I think that goes to the heart of what her expectation is about us. And it's certainly not one of equality.